For over 8 decades, the name Albion meant something special on the roads of Britain. These weren't just trucks and buses rolling out of the Scotstoun works in Glasgow. They were symbols of Scottish engineering excellence, built with a motto that became legendary, sure as the sunrise. Albion Motors was founded in 1899 and purchased by Leyland Motors in 1951, with vehicles manufactured under the Albion brand until 1972. But this story isn't just about corporate takeovers and badge engineering. It's about how Scotland's greatest lorry brand went from conquering export markets across 4 continents to disappearing entirely from the roads where it was born. Albion Lorries became renowned for their toughness and reliability, proving to be stiff competition for Foden trucks from World War I to the 1950s. Yet by 1980, not a single complete Albion vehicle rolled off the production line. How did a company that once dominated the commercial vehicle market across the British Empire simply vanish? The answer lies in a perfect storm of corporate politics, changing markets, and decisions that would haunt Scottish industry for decades to come. Thomas Blackwood Murray and Norman Osborne Fulton founded the Albion Motor Car Company in 1899, with Murray's father mortgaging the Heaviside estate in Biggar to provide initial capital. These weren't wealthy industrialists with vast resources. They were 2 young engineers who'd cut their teeth at Arrol Johnston, one of Scotland's pioneering motor companies. The factory started on the first floor of a building on Finiston Street in Glasgow with just 7 employees, before moving to new premises in Scotstoun in 1903. Picture those early days. Completed cars being lowered to the street using a winch, workers hauling heavy components up narrow staircases, the smell of varnished wood and oil filling the cramped workshop. In 1900, the company built its first motor car, a rustic-looking dog cart made of varnished wood, powered by a flat twin 8-horsepower engine with solid tyres. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. More importantly, it established Albion's reputation for building vehicles that could handle Scotland's punishing roads and unpredictable weather. As early as 1902, the company produced a half-ton van. While other manufacturers chased the glamorous passenger car market, Murray and Fulton saw opportunity in commercial vehicles. Scottish industry was booming. Glasgow was the second city of the empire. Someone had to move the goods that powered this industrial machine. Although motorcars were the main focus in the first 10 years, it was decided in 1909 to concentrate on commercial vehicles. During World War I, they built large quantities of 3-ton trucks for the War Office. This decision would define Albion's legacy. While competitors spread themselves thin across multiple vehicle types, Albion doubled down on what they did best: robust, reliable, commercial vehicles. The timing was perfect. During World War I, they built for the War Office large quantities of 3-ton trucks, powered by a 32-horsepower engine using chain drive to the rear wheels. Imagine the Scotstoun factory during wartime, workers in flat caps and overalls, the constant hammering of metal, the acrid smell of welding, trucks rolling off the line destined for the muddy battlefields of France. After the war, many of these were converted for use as charabancs. Those same military trucks that had hauled ammunition and supplies were transformed into passenger vehicles carrying families on seaside excursions and works outings. It was typical Albion ingenuity: one robust platform, multiple applications. But the real breakthrough came with the company's approach to naming and branding. Almost all Albion buses were given names, beginning with V, the Victor, Valiant, Viking, Valkyrie, and Venturer. In April 1931, the company was renamed Albion Motors Limited, with vehicles featuring the Sunrise badge. Albion's motto, "Sure as the sunrise," was adapted into the logo which featured on radiator badges. This wasn't just marketing, it was a promise etched in metal on every vehicle that left the factory. When you bought an Albion, you were buying Scottish reliability. You were buying a truck that would start every morning, rain or shine, for decades. From 1944, the company manufactured its own 4-cylinder and 6-cylinder diesel engines. While competitors relied on outside suppliers, Albion built everything in-house. The engine plant at Scotstoun became legendary throughout the industry. These weren't just power plants. They were mechanical symphonies engineered to run for hundreds of thousands of miles with minimal maintenance. Before the Second World War, Albion was one of the most prosperous British truck manufacturers, becoming a kind of pride in Scotland. Walk through Glasgow in the 1930s and 1940s, and Albion trucks were everywhere, delivering goods to shops along Hall Street, hauling coal from the Lanarkshire pits, carrying fish from the harbours of the West Coast. The distinctive sunrise badge was as much a part of Scottish identity as the thistle or the saltire. Trucks and buses were manufactured in the Scotstoun works until 1980, with buses exported to Asia, East Africa, Australia, India, and South Africa. This wasn't just a local success story. Albion Vikings were navigating the dusty roads of Kenya. Albion Clydesdales were hauling goods across the Australian outback. The company's reputation for building vehicles that could handle extreme conditions made them the preferred choice for colonial administrators and pioneering companies worldwide. But success bred complacency, and complacency invited predators. In 1951, Albion was purchased by Leyland Motors, which then became part of the British Leyland Motor Corporation in 1968. On paper, it looked like a logical partnership. Leyland was Britain's largest commercial vehicle manufacturer. Albion brought specialised knowledge and a loyal customer base. Together, they could dominate both domestic and export markets. The reality was more complicated. Leyland had acquired Albion not to strengthen it, but to control it. Albion merged with Leyland Motors in 1951, with Leyland reducing the size of the Albion range. Models that had taken years to develop were discontinued overnight. Production lines that employed hundreds of skilled workers were shuttered without warning. In 1951, the Albion Company was acquired by Leyland Motors. Until the late 1950s, production of older models continued, but gradually the influence of Leyland Motors became stronger. The latest Albion-developed trucks were presented in 1957. That final generation of true Albion designs represented everything the company had learned about commercial vehicle engineering, but it would also be their swan song. The company was acquired by Leyland Motors Limited in 1951, and business continued as normal for a time. However, by 1968, when the British Leyland Motor Corporation was formed, only one truck, the Clydesdale, and one bus, the Viking, remained in production. From a diverse range of vehicles serving markets across 6 continents, Albion had been reduced to just 2 models. The Scotstoun workforce watched helplessly as their life's work was systematically dismantled. Skilled engineers who had designed revolutionary transmission systems were reassigned to badge engineering exercises. Production workers who had built vehicles for export to 40 countries found themselves assembling rebadged Leyland designs. The Sunrise badge remained, but the sun was clearly setting on Albion's independence. British Leyland eliminated the Albion name in 1972, with products continuing to be built at the same factory under the Leyland brand. Imagine being a worker at Scotstoun in 1972. You arrived at work one morning to find that the company name above the factory gates had been painted over. The vehicles you built were identical to yesterday's, but they now wore Leyland badges. 8 decades of Scottish engineering heritage had been erased with a stroke of corporate bureaucracy. In 1980, vehicle production at the former Albion factory ceased, moving to the British Leyland plant at Bathgate. The final act was perhaps the most devastating. After stripping Albion of its identity, British Leyland decided it no longer needed the Scotstoun factory at all. Production moved to Bathgate, leaving behind empty workshops where generations of Scottish families had built their careers. The human cost was staggering. Before the war, there were some 70 different vehicle manufacturers in Scotland, but after the war, there were only 5. Albion had been the last great survivor of Scotland's automotive golden age. Its closure didn't just eliminate jobs, it severed Scotland's connection to an industry it had helped create. Following the collapse of DAF in 1993, Leyland DAF went into receivership, and the truck components business in Scotstoun was subject to a management buyout and transferred to a newly created company called Albion Automotive. For a brief moment, it seemed like the phoenix might rise from the ashes. Scottish entrepreneurs had reclaimed a piece of their industrial heritage. The Albion name was back in Scottish hands. In 1998, Albion Automotive was acquired by American Axle and Manufacturing Company of Detroit, but independence proved short-lived. Within 5 years, even this remnant of the original company had been sold to American owners. The irony was bitter. A company that had once exported Scottish engineering expertise to Detroit was now owned by Detroit Capital. The new company manufactures axles, driveline systems, chassis systems, crankshafts, and chassis components. Today, if you visit the Scotstoun site, you'll find a modern automotive components factory. Skilled workers still clock in each morning. Precision machinery still hums throughout the day. But no complete vehicles roll off the production line. The knowledge of how to design and build a complete truck or bus from the ground up has been lost. The site closed in October 2024. After 125 years, the final chapter in the Albion story has been written. The Scotstoun works that once employed thousands of people and shipped vehicles to 6 continents now stands empty. The sunrise badge that promised reliability, sure as the sunrise, has finally set. The loss of Albion represents more than corporate mismanagement. It symbolizes the systematic destruction of British manufacturing capability. The vehicles were exemplars of Scottish craftsmanship and engineering at points around the globe. When developing countries needed reliable transport, they chose Albion. When colonial administrators required vehicles that could handle impossible conditions, they specified Albion. Albion vehicles were once a familiar sight on Scottish, English, and Welsh roads, and were exported to South Africa, East Africa, Australia, India, and elsewhere in Asia. That global reach represented something profound about Scottish industrial capability. It proved that a relatively small factory in Glasgow could compete with multinational corporations and win. What might have been different if Albion had remained independent? Other European truck manufacturers, like Volvo and Scania, started as regional players and became global giants. DAF. Ironically, one of the companies that later acquired pieces of Albion began as a small Dutch manufacturer and built a worldwide reputation for quality. Mercedes-Benz truck division traces its roots to companies no larger than Albion was in 1950. Today, if you want to see an Albion lorry or bus, you need to visit a transport museum or attend a vintage vehicle rally. Quite a number of the vehicles have been restored, maintained, and preserved in both private hands and museums. Enthusiasts spend weekends maintaining these mechanical time capsules, keeping alive the memory of Scottish engineering excellence. But preservation isn't the same as progress. Scotland will never again export buses to Kenya or trucks to Australia bearing the thistle and the sunrise badge. The knowledge of how to build complete commercial vehicles has been lost, probably forever. The Albion story is ultimately a cautionary tale about the price of short-term thinking. Leyland acquired Albion to eliminate a competitor, not to nurture a partner. British Leyland closed Scotstoun to cut costs, not to build capability. American Axle bought the remnant to access technology, not to preserve heritage. Each decision made perfect sense from a narrow corporate perspective, but collectively they destroyed something irreplaceable: Scotland's ability to design, build, and export commercial vehicles that bore the proud mark of Scottish engineering. Sure as the sunrise, they said, but even the sun sets eventually, and once it sets, some nights last forever.